Welcome to our National Conversation, a podcast in which we discuss politics from all angles. We are completely nonpartisan, and all views, respectfully stated, are welcome here. Our podcast is unique in that it is hosted and run by students who are focused on finding solutions to the biggest problems facing America.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Allow Us to Explain from our National Conversation. My name is Makayla Idelburg, and I am a student at the University of Southern California. I'm also one of the journalism interns here at our National Conversation. So before we get started, let's hear from our co-moderator, Jeff Hall, who is the CEO of our National Conversation.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Holly. My name is Jeff Hall. I'm an old-fashioned newspaper dinosaur going way back. When I was young, like these student interns are, one of my big internships was as a cub reporter at the Kansas City Star. I worked there for 10 years and then went to Washington for a year to do something called a White House Fellowship, the nonpartisan public policy leadership development program. And while I was there, I was recruited to come out here to LA to join the Los Angeles Times. I was a VP there and then went out on my own and started a little community newspaper called the Brentwood News. Don't ask me how, it still survives to this day. But as everybody knows, print is in massive decline. So I've been going digital in recent years. And one of my pet peeves is that media has become way too polarized these days, much like our politics. Everybody has picked a side and everybody's angry and everybody's fighting and nobody's solving problems anymore. So I'm delighted to have NoLabels with us today as a guest, Holly Page. And we got these students here, a group of about 90 students per semester. We've had over 600 students so far from all over the country. We're completely nonpartisan. We study issues. We come up with policy proposals. The students actually wrote a book called Let's Fix America, where they interviewed over 175 experts and got the skinny from both sides and then put it all together in a nice nonpartisan way that doesn't offend anybody, because we really tried our best to go with proposals that 60% or more of Americans would actually support based on the polling data that we could find. So I think we share a lot in common with NoLabels. I was looking at your site the other day and I read your pamphlet called Sense, really well done, very simply stated. I think that's what we need in America these days is simplicity. Everybody's made everything so complicated. So with that, Holly, why don't we give you 3 or 4 minutes and just take your time. Tell us first about yourself, who you are. What is your journey that got you to the place of being a co-founder of NoLabels, and what is NoLabels all about?
Great. So Holly Page, I am a co-founder of NoLabels, and I actually am a native of California. I grew up in Sacramento and got a job with Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign because no one else wanted it. No one thought he could win. And came back to Washington, D.C., eventually ended up becoming the executive vice president of the Democratic Leadership Council, the DLC, which had been Clinton's think tank before he ran for president, and really tried to advance what the outside world defined as centrist democratic politics. But the way we always looked at it was the task at hand. How do you take the core values that animated then the Democratic Party and find modern ways to advance them? And so we had a lot of success, but some interesting things happened in the 2000s that, Jeff, you actually alluded to or spoke about. I think the demise of local newspapers has taken a huge toll on our national conversation, right? Because what we at NoLabels, part of why we were created, was we realized all of the incentives in Washington reward the wrong thing. They reward partisanship, division, extremism. If you actually solve the problem, or, God forbid, talk to somebody from the opposite party to try to find a broader consensus, you're punished. You get primary challenges, you lose ideological money. So NoLabels was started to really create support for the men and women who show up at Congress and the Senate every day and want to actually solve their communities and the nation's problems.
You guys actually played an active role in forming what's called the Problem Solvers Caucus, isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. So Nancy Jacobson, who founded NoLabels, was actually my very first boss in Washington over 30 years ago. We've worked with, for, and around each other all these years, trying to do the same thing that I discussed. How do we steward the values that really are at the core of our nation, but find modern ways to advance them? And she is a believer of the power of convening. Okay, she knows that when you bring people face to face and they can, put down their idealized fantasies of what the opposition looks like, and they can talk to each other, that you can find common ground. So she brought together Democrat Josh Gottheimer and Republican Tom Reed. They started to meet for coffee. They brought in other colleagues. Eventually, that grew to what is now a standing House caucus, the Problem Solvers Caucus, 64 members of the House, half Democrats, half Republicans. We call it Noah's Ark because you have to be accompanied by somebody of the opposite party to join. And while it's stunning that few people, even in Washington, really understand the problem solvers and the role that they've played in the last few Congresses, they've had an incredibly important impact. I would say that all of the successful bipartisan legislation that has been passed really went through the caucus process, and it was absolutely essential to getting the hard infrastructure bill passed, the CHIPS Act, American Great Outdoor Act, the Electoral Reform Act, the gun safety bill that Senator Cornyn passed. So all those things that had bipartisan support really originated or went through the caucus. We have allies in the Senate, a little different structure, so they don't really they have caucuses, but not as many as the House. So we just say allies. But a really interesting innovation was Nancy had the insight that good things can come from bringing the House and the Senate together. Turns out they are really siloed, and they rarely work together on legislation or the strategy to pass legislation. And so by bringing them together, we started to do that about 5 months before COVID. And initially it was a little like a junior high dance. People were in their corners and it was awkward. But then COVID hit. And what ended up happening was our House and Senate allies, Democrats and Republicans, met every single day for 3 solid weeks to figure out how to navigate those early days of COVID. That really kind of bonded them together, and they saw the power that they could get from working together. That is a direct lineage to the creation of the outline of the hard infrastructure package, and then all of the many twists and turns that legislation took to get passed. Incidentally, that did pass with 17 Republicans voting for it. Mitch McConnell and Bernie Sanders voted for that piece of legislation.
Interestingly, COVID played a huge role in the formation of our national conversation. I placed an ad on a digital site that seeks out interns. I had an internship that I wanted to put together and get 3 or 4 interns together to study, how can we build this thing called our national conversation? And then COVID hit, and all of the students lost their internships, their summer school classes got canceled, their summer jobs got wiped out. We got over 2,000 applications in a matter of weeks.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. And we picked 92 interns that first summer of 2020. And it's just taken on a life of its own. And a big part of our mission now is to help provide opportunities for future leaders of America to get leadership experience. Because let's face it, Gen Z is inheriting a very troubled world. And anything we can do to prepare them and pass the baton, I think is a positive thing. And so with that, I'd like to introduce 2 of our future leaders. We have Tania Ruedas-Ortiz, who's our community outreach leader. We also have Sam Taylor, who's our managing editor. Tania recently graduated from Laverne College. Sam is still a sophomore at Brigham Young. We have students from all over the country, elite universities, community colleges, trade schools. We have a few grad students. We have some high schoolers. So it's really quite a mix. State schools, you name it, we've got it. And we go out of our way to try to attract a diverse mix by all measurements, whether it's ethnicity, region of country, political ideology, and that's what we're all about. We're trying to get people talking again, just like you are. So with that, Sam and Tanya, why don't you guys introduce yourselves very quickly, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Taylor. I am the core content director and managing editor at ONC, as Jeff said. And also, as he said, I'm studying at Brigham Young University, where I'm currently majoring in political science with minors in business and philosophy. I'd very much like to get into public policy, perhaps getting into something at the intersection between legal work and public policy. Very interested in pursuing perhaps a GED or a master's in government, something similar. There's a lot of potential routes out there. So I'm trying to get more experience and see exactly what would fit best. And yeah, I've been with ONC for about 3 years at this point and really enjoy everything the organization is doing, all the people that I've met, and the inter-ideological conversations we're able to have in a civil way. So I'm very excited to continue working with the organization and to learn more about NoLabels.
Awesome. Thank you.
Tanya.
Hi, I am Tania Ruedas-Ortiz. I study political communication at the University of Laverne. So if you're wondering, yes, I do love to talk, but I also love to share information that what I like to call is cute, which is clear, understandable, thematic, and encompassing. And here at our national conversation with my team, we come up with events we believe will create conversation on America's biggest issues, right? So we can understand the perspectives that surround these issues and ultimately come up with a solution that is, again, encompassing. And I'm very excited to see what this conversation is.
Great. Really lovely to meet you.
So with that, let's turn it back over to Makayla, our moderator today, and she will help everybody ask questions. And then Holly, you can field them to your best ability.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for introducing yourselves, Sam, Jeff, and Tanya. It's so nice to have you guys with us for this conversation, including our student interns. So without further ado, let's get started. So Holly, can you just give us a rundown on all of NoLabels' successes? Like, how has the organization grown from 2010 to now and over the past decade? What has been accomplished?
Great. Well, as we discussed just a minute ago, the formation of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and even beyond that, we named that caucus. We realized that the words that were being used to describe the politics that we wanted to advance were not really accurate. You know, we're not really centrists or moderates. I think there's political realignment happening, and really what we want. And by the way, what we, through our polling and research and just talking to people, think that new voters we want our elected representatives to solve the problems. We want to stop having the same conversations over and over and over again. Stop, looking at issues like immigration, where we know that there's consensus broadly to have secure borders, but to modernize the process by which people get to come and be a part of this incredible nation. And, we also know that the elected party leaders would rather have so many of these issues to hit the other side over the head with than actually do what's right for our nation. And so that is really the politics of problem solving is how we define this. Okay, so we established and support problem solvers. Same in the Senate, as I said, with the allies. And, this is really important. Nobody likes to talk about money in politics, but it's really a key factor in the polarization. I believe that it's not that there's too much money. I believe there's not enough. And what I mean by that is very few Americans give $200 or more politically. In fact, very few Americans give anything. I certainly was raised in a family that never gave political money. And so there's so few people who give the money. A lot of those folks are very animated by, single ideas or alliances with certain ideologies, where the vast majority of Americans are working hard, playing by the rules, raising their families or caring for parents or whatever it is, are not engaging in that way. And I believe that online money has given rise to what I call the politics of performance. You say something crazy, you do something outrageous, you break through online, and you get $1 million overnight. You don't have to eat chicken, you don't have to make any phone calls, and they like it, they want it, and it gives them an independent source of power. So one of the really important things that NoLabels has done is we explain our philosophy, explain the politics of problem solving, help people understand the perverted incentive structure in Washington, and say to folks, listen, if you're going to give political money, give it through our link to the men and women who show courage to actually solve the problems. Okay. And by the way, NoLabels doesn't take a cent of that money. It's really meant to show the political establishment that there is a marketplace out in the country of people who want to support and encourage the politics of problem solving. And we don't care if people give $1, whatever, it's really, it's not about, it's about showing that there are people out here who are paying attention. So, and we were quite successful in the last cycle, the last election cycle, and got a lot of people to do just that. And by the way, we don't just, just because you're a member of the caucus, for example, we don't necessarily advance your name, and we always do it in a bipartisan way. If we put up a Democrat, we always put up a Republican, but we don't advance your name just because you say the right things. You have to actually, put action behind that, because everybody will say the right, everybody will tell our audience, for example, what they think they want to hear. But, this is really tough to take on your party and stare, Nancy Pelosi in the last Congress or President Biden right in the eyes and say, I don't think that what you're asking me to do is in the best interest of my community or my country. So very few people are willing to do it. The Marines have a saying, if you go into a fight, bring friends. And for too long, the men and women showing up in our House and Senate who really wanted to solve the problems had no friends. So the money is important, but even more important, we have invested heavily in citizen outreach. We know that NoLabels is giving voice to 77 million American voters who do not see their values reflected in the national conversation, Jeff, and want a different politics. They're heartsick for this nation. They're exhausted from being pitted against their neighbors so that somebody can have short-term political profit and gain, right? So we are in every state with outreach staff. We are constantly trying to figure out better ways to communicate with people. So Tania, I love the cute acronym. That was really awesome. And we definitely need help in that area. But, so we just try to engage individuals, and Zoom is an incredibly powerful tool for that, because we have had lots of open meetings where we invite thousands of people to come and engage with us and talk to, the elected officials or thought leaders or whoever else we bring in front of them, and kind of get in this with us, because the old structures are broken. The old ways that parties organized and connected to Americans do not work anymore. And I'm not saying that we've figured it out, but we are trying.
Thank you so much for that in-depth explanation, Holly. Really appreciate that. I'm going to turn the next question over to Tania, and then Sam will kind of have more questions on NoLabels plans for 2024.
So you kind of already hit this question, but I'm gonna make it really clear, right? My question is on the idea of a third-party candidate under the NoLabels banner this coming presidential election. How serious is NoLabels about this, and why does it believe it's so necessary to have this as an option?
Yes. So NoLabels is currently working to get ballot access in every state at the presidential line only. And our intention is not to create a third party. Okay. We don't want to have an institution that rivals the Democrats and the Republicans. We, based on what our 77 million common sense voters are saying to us and to anybody who will listen, we know they want a third choice. They want an alternative between Presidents Biden and Trump if those are the eventual nominees. But the only thing NoLabels can do is get the ballot access. And by the way, we're being, roadblocked and fought every step of the way. But we know that getting that will help us leverage our collective voice. And if it is President Biden's and Trump and the 77 million common sense voters are consistent in their demand for something different, then the ballot will be there should candidates who reflect our worldview, emerge. And if not, we'll use our collective voice to create a political imperative around something that there's no political courage to do. Right, to deal with immigration, for example, or to deal with the unbelievable weight of the federal deficit, federal spending, that, by the way, everybody in Washington is complicit in. It's not just one party. One likes to spend more than the other in general, but they both have spent plenty. And, these are serious issues that are going to hamper our ability to honor the true promise of this country, which is equality of opportunity. We've got some big challenges coming down the pike. AI is going to fundamentally disrupt our economy and the way people make their way in this world. We need serious conversations about how we meet those challenges. No one has the answers. That's why a bipartisan approach is so important. No one has the answers. We have to engage people with diverse backgrounds from different parts of this nation to come up with our collective vision, So the idea is NoLabels will get the ballot access. If the 77 million are consistent next spring in saying we want a third choice, we will offer our ballot to candidates. They would then run a presidential campaign. NoLabels would not have any part of that. It would be a more consistent with the way campaigns have been run. But the idea is a unity ticket, a Republican and a Democrat running together, because we know that that's the way the problems get solved.
Holly, speaking of a third party, I know, Sam, you had a question about that. Do you mind stating your question as well?
Absolutely. So I know that you mentioned you're not establishing a rival third party per se, but at the very least, you'd be, it seems, providing an alternative to the traditional nominated candidates, at least those that are most likely. Though support, or rather dissatisfaction for the sort of two-party options does, based on a Pew Research report from 2022, seem to be at an all-time low. The actual capture of those votes in a third alternative seems to be quite rare. Since early 20th century, there have been about 17 presidential elections where the two parties have captured 98% or more of the total presidential vote. So what do you foresee in terms of the success of this initiative? You mentioned how maybe, if these millions of voters are consistent, then you could see some potentially sweeping successes. But what do you think is most likely or realistic in that sense?
So first of all, I don't think any analogy that we've witnessed in the last 25 years is equal to this, right? For many, many reasons. First of all, we've never had candidates quite like we may face in 2020 for different reasons, Presidents Biden and Trump. Most of the people who've run to the left or right of the party's nominees. Ross Perot is the candidate in recent times who comes to mind, but you all are too young, but he had actually 36% in the polls in June. And then he dropped out, and it was, conspiracy theories about the CIA and whatever. Then he gets back in and he gets 19%. And by the way, 19%, but he was running against two essentially moderate centrist candidates, both of whom were more than qualified to lead the nation. So that is one factor. It really it's not apples to apples to compare to anything in recent history. Ralph Nader, Jill Stein all ran to the Democratic Party's left. So of course they pulled they pulled only from that party, and they pulled basically protest votes. if we go, we only intend to give our ballot to candidates who, number one, are ready and able to lead the nation, who have the ability to win. And, we would look at governors, people who've run massive organizations or structures. We're not talking about, cable TV personalities or kind of, specific interest group representatives. And the way we're thinking of that right now is we will have a convention in Dallas, Texas in spring of 2024, and our delegates that go through a process in each state will actually pick the candidates themselves. We will narrow the field so that it's folks that we believe can win and can be president, because that's the number one criteria. And then the delegates at that convention would actually pick. But we have no intention of being a spoiler. I would argue that the system's already spoiled, and that's why you have so many people who are very vocal in their dissatisfaction with the choices that the parties are producing. But we don't intend to get 3, 4, 5%. We go if we can get 34% or above, because in 48 states in this nation, it's a winner-take-all electoral process, right? So we only need 34%. You don't need 51. And we believe that based on the states and their past voting patterns and other data that we have about our voters, we see a path to 270.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. And as you said, NoLabels seems to be pushing for like a nonpartisan, agenda and kind of looking out for the best of the American people. However, there seems to be some disagreements, some kind of controversy around that. And I know, Jeff, you had a question about that, if you don't mind asking.
So, Holly, you come from a Democratic background, and my Democratic friends are paranoid that NoLabels is somehow going to play the role of spoiler and throw the election to Donald Trump. My Republican friends don't seem to be saying much at all about NoLabels. Maybe they figure you might do some harm to Joe Biden, and therefore they're happy with that. But I've been reading the news lately, sort of a news junkie, and there's a group called the Democracy Alliance, Democrats, big money people, who are potentially raising money to actually fight NoLabels. And some people fear NoLabels because NoLabels doesn't reveal who its donors are, and maybe it's a big front for corporate America, or maybe even the Republicans. So there's kind of a trust issue here, and trust is so central to everything that's problematic in America these days. So how do you deal with that?
So first of all, on our donors, don't forget what we are doing. We are saying we are potentially giving a point of entry for Americans to challenge a sitting American president and a former American president. Okay, this is serious business. And individuals who are highly affiliated, who are publicly affiliated with the organization, we've been threatened. We've had, maligned pictures on vans driven around our neighborhoods. Like, they're not going to go easily into the future. Okay, they're going to fight and hold on for absolutely every single inch of political turf that they have. And so, no, we're not going to expose our donors to that type of retaliation. And otherwise, who would want to be a part of it? I mean, it's high wire stuff. And I would suggest, and have told our critics, bring back any proof that NoLabels has ever advocated for specific policy, language, or an industry, or anything that would individually benefit, a person or a corporation or an industry. I mean, in fact, our whole work with the Congress, we never proactively put out any policy or legislative ideas because their ability to work together was so fragile. We said, you tell us where you can work together, and our job is to show up and support you. So I have no qualms about our process of being like every other C4, the AARP, the NAACP, and not reveal our donors. In terms of, the Democrats going crazy and the Republicans not, if I were the Republicans, I wouldn't either. Why would you need to when the Democrats are so hysterical about it? But that time will come, because I believe that it will be very hard for President Trump to win re-election without some of the key states where we would be very competitive. Arizona and Utah come to mind. We have no intention of throwing the country into more tumult and conflict. So the genius part about this whole plan is, at any point along the way, we see that we have unintended consequences of our engagement, we can pull the plug. NoLabels has until August of 2024, because remember, we control the ballot line, to basically stand down and use our political power someplace else. But something really important I want to clarify: the Democrats aren't fighting NoLabels. We're not manifesting this. We're giving voice to it. They are telling millions and millions of Americans that they know better than what these voters are very clearly saying, that, the root word of liberty is libertas, which means in Latin, the freedom to choose. So by preventing Americans from having another choice that they clearly want, these Democrats are actually treading over the very core of our values. You can't say that you want to defend and safeguard democracy and then trample over liberty. It doesn't work that way. And I would say they should spend more time talking to the people that we know that we represent in ways that connect to the issues that keep them up at night: housing costs, gas costs, the cost of education, safety in our streets. I'm from San Francisco. What's happened to that city is criminal, okay? Criminal. So how about less time trying to prevent competition and more time trying to, basically eliminate us by not giving us any political space, because they take it, that they speak to the voters that we represent. But I'm friends with a lot of folks who lead these organizations that are the most vicious in attacking us, and I'm sad for them. And I think that history will prove that they're absolutely on the wrong side of this, that, no matter what happens in 2024, if it is President Biden versus Trump competing again, it will be unprecedented. Either we'll have the oldest American president ever, we'll have a indicted felon, or we'll have a new breakthrough choice of a Republican and a Democrat to challenge the entire broken, corrupted system, and we'll have a different way in this country. So the American people get to pick, not, a bunch of donors in a room who want to protect their own political turf.
I'm kind of going off of what you last just said. As someone who's younger, I'm 20, so I'm very much new to the voting routine. When I look at these candidates like Joe Biden, like you mentioned, who is 80, or Donald Trump, who's 77, or even Joe Manchin, who's kind of been hinted at being the NoLabels candidate, do you think, who is 76, do you think these people are a little too old, and should the baton kind of be handed off to the next generation? Because when I see these people, it's very much the age gap is apparent, and the knowledge and our issues are kind of different as well.
Again, it really doesn't matter what I think. It really is what 77 million voters, what, our voters and what other voters are consistently telling the polls. But I don't think it's necessarily about age, because remember, Bernie Sanders activated a whole generation of Americans to engage. I think it's about being willing to challenge a broken system, a system that is not solving the problems. And the connection with the physical age is that obviously President Biden, he first ran for president, 45 years ago. He's in a context of a politics that no longer is relevant, is what is really the problem. And, we have got to figure out, how we govern and manage a 21st century economy and society. Because right now we're doing it with 20th century structures and it's not working.
My question is really that, so American politics are dominated by tribalism, right? And the notion that truth is different for everyone, these phenomenons have created a comforting illusion and prevented us from having these uncomfortable political discussions and confronting harsh realities. How is NoLabels encouraging these quote unquote uncomfortable discussions that we must have to create change and come up with solutions?
Well, I think I reject your central premise. I don't think that politics has to be governed by tribalism and, messages that, that manipulate the truth to activate voters for, to be donors or whatever. I think that's a lack of leadership. I think that what we need is leadership that can be honest with the American people about the state of things, because that is not happening, and can really lean into what unites us. Okay. If you think about how the country was founded, a bunch of people who didn't agree on much come together. They have one idea that is the central theme, which is liberty, by the way, and they have to work their way through it. Nothing's changed. We have the same situation. We're all different. We all have different perspectives. We all bring different, values and life experience to the conversation. And we have to honor and respect people who don't think like us and find our common way together. That's the task at hand. But I'll tell you this, okay? And Jeff, I was very interested when you said, you're helping give leadership skills to young people. I think that's incredibly important and awesome. And we would love to do anything we can at NoLabels to be a part of that. But, I'm more and more convinced that the change that we need will not come from politicians. Okay. I don't think that even the well-intentioned good ones can get themselves outside of a structure where the incentives are so corrupting. And the incentives of survival, of not being publicly embarrassed, of winning elections. I think it's going to take citizen leaders. We have to chart the path. We have to cut down, our way through the territory, and then the politicians will come. And if you look back in history, it's always the way it happens. The progressives, the civil rights movement, the suffrage movement, the conservative movement of the 1950s and 60s, the New Democrats. It was always citizen leaders first. Then the politicians go like, okay, it's safe. I can go down that path. And that's what we're doing with the politics of problem solving. We invite all of you really to be a part of this with us, and would love your voices and your ideas and your ability to communicate through social media, because we do not have that. And we can put this country on a different trajectory.
I'm just wondering what opportunities exist for NoLabels to engage in various forms of collaboration. One thing that came to mind in some research, and perhaps this is now a bad example, would be Andrew Yang's Forward Party, but that party itself adopts the centrist label, which you yourself have stated NoLabels kind of rejects. So what opportunities for collaboration exist? Does that involve the Forward Party, other organizations, et cetera?
Yeah, we've been in contact with Forward and have a lot of former Forward employees working with us and our outreach teams. They were very focused on electoral reforms and ranked choice voting and other things like that. Our view is that we don't have that much time. So, we encourage folks who want to do that, but there are already groups doing it, and we don't have that much time. 2024 is going to set the course of our nation for the next 50 years, if longer. And either we collectively make our voice heard, that we want a government that represents the goodness of this people and people who want problems solved so we can meet the challenges of the future, or we will go deeper and deeper into division and despair. and being used as pawns, okay, for short-term political gain and small dollars online. That is what is happening. So we are open to collaborate with anyone. I really am interested actually in seeing the book that the National Conversation produced. Our book, as you said, Jeff, our policy playbook wasn't, the geniuses in the back room of NoLabels coming up with ideas. It was, we did the same exact thing. We went out, quantitative and qualitative research for years and years and years, and we came up with policy positions and solutions that were majority opinions. 60, 70, 80% of Americans can come together and say, all right, this may not be everything that I would want, but I can see that this could be the best collective solution. I travel a lot. Okay. I travel a lot. This is a very, this is an incredible country, but it's very different. Parts of this country are incredibly different from the others, and we need more conversations about what binds us together and less about why, why why we should be pitted against each other and hate the other side.
Thanks for mentioning the book. I'm going to put in a little plug if you don't mind. It's called Let's Fix America by Our National Conversation. And we had a lot of policy experts, older people, work with our students as they were preparing their proposals. And before we went to press, I had a bunch of people read this thing to say, how does it look? Are we on track, or are we going too much in one direction or the other? My liberal friends thought it was too conservative. My conservative friends thought it was too liberal. And I'm a very moderate person. I thought it was too moderate. One of the problems with centrism is, how do you make it exciting? The people on the far left and the far right, they've got the flamethrowers, and every night they're breathing fire on cable TV. Centrists tend to be a little more moderate in their approach and in their personalities. They don't yell and scream. They deal in logic, but it's just not as sexy, is it?
Well, I certainly have heard that criticism before, but I would argue that what we're doing, this is a rebellion. Okay, this is a rebellion, and challenging a sitting American president potentially and a former president. That's pretty exciting. It creates high drama, and we know that if we end up going in the route to have a presidential campaign, it will be very, it will be very exciting.
But in the early stages of NoLabels, I thought you came across as being very, kumbaya, maybe even a little namby-pamby. It wasn't clear to me what you guys stood for. But now you've gone, whoa, all the way over to the other side, and you are doing something rather radical, and it's breathtaking. And people are wondering, whoa, what are these guys doing? And, is it really going to work? And what if it doesn't work? And so you're shaking things up for sure. I'd like to ask you what you think about the media's role in all of this. How do you view the media landscape? What's right? What's wrong? Is there anybody out there you trust?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? I mean, obviously a free press is essential to our very ability to be free people. But I do think that the media is in silos that are dictated by their business plans, how they think they're going to survive financially. And yes, I think it's a really big problem. I also really am aware, because I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old who do not watch television at all. They don't even really engage on social media platforms. They get all of their information from debates held on Discord and YouTube from people that they really like and follow. And no one that I know in Washington, not even people much younger than I, are really thinking about how to communicate with them and how that plays into the national conversation we must have. So I don't know the solution to it. It is a big challenge. Like I said, the demise of local papers that held local elected officials accountable we've really paid a terrible price for that. And So yeah, but I'll work on the political thing. You work on the press media thing, and then maybe, yeah.
Okay. All right.
In our few final moments here, Holly, would you like to ask any of our student interns here any questions, or kind of open it up to like a small Q&A in our last couple minutes?
Yeah, I'd love to know what, first of all, where you get what is your source of news and political information? I'd like to know that. And I'd also like to know what you think about instead of trying to define what centrism means, what you think of our strategy of trying to define this as the politics of problem solving. Does that connect in for you or not? I'm curious about that.
The news, personally, I tend to focus on various forms of aggregators. So there's an app that automatically comes in on iPhones. ONC has a news aggregator on its website. And I really like just trying to find a wide variety of sources. Of course, sometimes that can be somewhat difficult depending on the story, or sometimes the sources are all kind of saying one thing, and maybe it's neglecting other perspectives. So it can certainly be difficult to try to parse through all of that. But one other thing I have noticed is I only really click on articles that seem particularly interesting. Otherwise, I'm just skimming through headlines. And with the sensationalism that can entail, that itself might be problematic. And then as far as the adopting politics of problem solving as opposed to centrism, I think that does resonate. At ONC, we attempt to do something somewhat similar, with policy proposals, with the book that we've written, to really focus on how these issues can be resolved by combining the insights of a broad range of ideologies, parties, people with diverse perspectives, and so forth. So for me personally, I do think that term does resonate.
Thank you.
For me, I'm much like Sam, where I use ONC's news aggregator, right? Because I'm a moderate, so sometimes in some issues I may lean a little bit to left on, others to right on. At least with the aggregator is showing me articles from Fox News, from CNN, even all the way from The Economist, right? I need that diversity of opinions and perspectives to reach some sort of conclusion about what I should be doing, right? Because when you know better, you do better, right? And in terms of what like the Problem Cox is doing and NoLabels is doing, I love it, right? I'm 24. I grew in an era of cynicism, right? I have a very hard time trusting politicians and trusting our government. So when I put myself in these organizations like Our National Conversation, I want to bring trust back into politics. I want people to recognize that they have the political power, right? It's not the elites, it's not the super hyper educated, it's us. So I want them to recognize their power. That's why I want to share information that is digestible to them. So they can feel like, oh, I know what to do. I know how to come and set issues. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen here.
Great.
Holly, the students have mentioned a couple times our news aggregator. Our site is ournationalconversation.org. And when you get there, you'll see that we have all of today's breaking news, but we show it from the perspective of multiple media outlets simultaneously. So you can see how Fox News, Huffington Post, CNN, New York Times, BBC, how they're all playing the same story at the same time in real time. And then all day long, it's updating. We employ the same philosophy with our opinion writers and proposal writers. We have moderates, we have conservatives, we have liberals, everybody's welcome. We treat each other respectfully. I mean, we prove every day that civil dialogue is very easy to accomplish if you just set your mind to it. So I think we're on the right path. I'm hoping we can figure out a way to work together. And maybe after this meeting, we could spend 2 or 3 minutes on that. Any last questions for the students or any final statements about NoLabels that you might like to impart to our audience?
Just that I think what Tania said is right on. We're having a crisis of trust everywhere, but especially in politics. I think our effort has grown out of the notion that we've been told so many times, we're just going to elect this one and it's all going to be great, or like that one. And just exactly as Tania said, People have the power. It is the Wizard of Oz. You've had it all along. You've had the power all along. We just have to organize and use our collective voice to exert that. And that is what NoLabels does. We're not affiliated, aligned with any single politician. They sometimes they're with us, sometimes they're not. That's okay, because we believe that we are representing the voice of the common sense majority. So it is about returning power to where it rightfully belongs. The big donors of the Democratic Party can come at us, but guess what? I think they underestimate what is fueling and driving this conversation. And, all the money in the world will not sell to the American people what they do not want to buy. So good luck. And I'd much rather use our time talking with your fabulous organization and these super impressive students who make it up. So thank you all for giving us the opportunity. I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much, Holly, for your time and being here with us for this conversation. So excited to see where NoLabels goes further with your mission and to see what happens in the future. This has been this week's episode of Allow Us to Explain. Can you just mention really quickly, where can the audience find NoLabels online?
NoLabels.org.
Awesome. And as Jeff mentioned before, we're ournationalconversation.org and Our National Conversation on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and our NATL Convo on Twitter. Tune in for next week's episode of Allow Us to Explain, where we talk about Indigenous Peoples Day. And thank you again for coming, and thank you everyone for being a part of this conversation. Have a great day.
This podcast was brought to you by Our National Conversation, a place where students generate policy solutions to the biggest problems facing America. Join us in freeing political dialogue from hyperpartisanship. To learn more about what you heard today, check us out at ournationalconversation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Our National Conversation to show your support and keep up with our latest efforts.